best in faction?
The next generation.
It's 10th edition, baby!
Woo! I'm Tyler.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Lucas.
And this morning we are coming to you fresh and hot at the ass crack of dawn, also known as 9 a.m. because we're a bunch of dudes in our 20s and it's the weekend. Trying to get in a sweet show for y'all this weekend before we jump right back into the woods. Going crazy because we have got a brand new edition, and man, oh man, is there some Warhammer to play. We're coming to you today just talking about early impressions of 10th. For those of you, there's a lot going on, so let's go ahead and really quickly, date this and situate it. It's currently June 18th, 2023 at 9 a.m. If a crazy FAQ drops at 10 a.m. that changes the entire game, we haven't heard about it yet. Sorry. But we've all been talking about 10th a ton. We've been playing a bunch of 10th. We've got a whole lot of things to talk about, thoughts to share, community responses to respond to, and experiences and excitements that we'd like to tell you about. But before we jump into any of that, got to check in with the boys. How are we doing today, Lucas?
Pretty good, man. And anytime a new edition rolls around or new rules get released, the first thing I always get excited about is hobby. So you'll probably see me doing a lot of hobby today as we do our show. But yeah, it's been a wild week. There's just been all sorts of crazy info getting released, and people getting excited about all sorts of stuff. So feeling pretty good about 10th edition so far. I've played one actual game that tried to use the Leviathan missions. We were like crudely rolling secondaries from our, from screenshots on our phone type of thing, which was kind of awkward. But that game was a lot of fun. And there's definitely some cool stuff that my favorite factions have to offer. So excited to get to explore those in the next couple weeks. But overall, doing really well. Yeah, that's about it. How about you, Nick? How are you doing this last week?
Dude, I am excited. Finally finished my school year. So I've been kind of sleeping like the past 2 days. The last week with Ian in town, it was very hard to motivate myself to go to bed early because we all wanted to keep staying up late and looking at list tinkering, as well as playing board games, that sort of thing. So yesterday I slept in for the first time in a while, which was super nice. And yeah, I'm super excited to waking up a bit early today. Got a list made last night. Got the models ready to go, and right after the show, we're going to head over to a friend's house and play the first game of 10th edition for me. Hopefully 1 or 2 games, and I'll be able to finally determine if these thoughts in my head are terrible or amazing. So, yeah. We'll get into some stuff today, but there's a lot to be spooked about with 10th edition. There's a lot to be excited about, just like any change to the game. So, yeah. How about you, Tyler? How you doing on this fine Sunday morning?
Bro, I am doing great. Got through my grad school finals this past week. Very happy to be done with that. Had a lot of fun playing 40K, 10th edition. Like you said, a lot of fun playing board games with the guys this week. Just drove back to get my little brother home for the summer. So I'm at my folks' house for a bit. Hopefully the internet doesn't give out on me this time. But yeah. I'm having a ton of fun, lots of exciting stuff. Like Lucas said, I got a lot of hobby. Obviously, with Leviathan coming out, I've got an insane amount of hobby coming up soon. But also just the Nids and GSD stuff in general has required a lot of stuff. I've got a little snake friend over here who's going to be getting finished up pretty soon. That should be fun. Oh, I didn't bring my paints. Whoops. Anyway, that'll get done in a couple weeks. But yeah, I'm having a real good time. Very excited. We got a 10th edition tournament down at our local shop this coming weekend, so I'm very excited for that. We're gonna play a bunch. One of my buddies down here in California recently got a new FLG table and mat and terrain set, and that's gonna be real great. So we're gonna get to play on all that. Very excited. It is a good time to be a Warhammer player. Maybe not one that cares about the WTC because Rules Lock is rapidly approaching, and my oh my, do we have no idea what that's going to look like. But in general, I'm having a real good time. So, let's jump on into some of our discussion today. As we said, Lucas and I have each played a game of 10th, not against each other. Nick has not yet played a game of 10th, but we've all been reading and listening and watching all the things as well, so we got a lot to think about here. And I want to start off on a positive note, because there is a lot of doom and gloom out there right now, and a lot of it is justified. There are a lot of things about 10th that need adjusting, and we'll talk about a lot of that stuff in a bit. But I want to start off with, just off the top of your head, boys, what is the one thing so far that has been the most fun about 10th, or that you are the most excited about when it comes to this new edition? At any level, just what's the thing that has you, like, jumping up and down, because, there's some fun stuff out there. Whoever has one first can start.
I don't know if this would be my favorite, but it's certainly up there. Just the general reduction in AP, I feel like is really fun. Now things like AP1, AP2 actually feel meaningful, and they feel like when you have a unit that's AP2, it's like, wow, this is decent AP, instead of, oh, this is whatever. It makes the armor penetration values actually feel like what they're supposed to do, which is really great. And in general, I mean, like, the most cutting edge lists, I'm sure it won't feel less lethal, but in general, I feel like weapons have gotten less lethal, and it's more about the interactions between units and their abilities, much more so than, oh, this unit happened to be a little too efficient, now I blast you off the table. So I'm a big fan of the reduced AP in the game. It's fun to just be able to take armor saves every once in a while, especially with Orcs getting a better armor save. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think for me, the change I'm most excited about is mission change. We've been playing with the same missions since Nachmund came out, basically. And a lot of those were even like variations of like GT Pack 2021, 2022. So we kind of been playing with the same exact mission layouts from most of 9th edition. I mean, obviously there's a few that went away. I'm trying to remember like the old ones that we like surround and destroy, like those ones went away, but like Data Scry stayed, and Recover stayed, and that sort of thing. So those missions definitely felt pretty solved to me, especially with the armies that I played, which then makes the game feel kind of stale. And all I've really heard and seen about 10th edition missions is that they seem very dynamic. Like the objectives seem a lot more all over the place. The objectives seem a lot more all over the place. I'm interested in trying the deck thing. I'm sure that at some point I'm going to draw an objective I can't complete. It's going to be like bummer. But, the option to play on fixed or tactical sounds very cool. Obviously, we don't yet know if the GT pack is going to have different rules. But from what I've seen so far, everything looks very fresh and exciting, which is my favorite part about a new edition. On a new edition note, not really 10th edition, but just more a new edition thing, I think the other thing I'm most excited about is just like, I love when a new edition comes and they're kind of able to like totally look at units and rebalance them. There's a lot of like units and Necrons, for example, that I haven't had seen the light of day for like 6 years, and I'm very excited to be putting them back on the table. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of double down on what Nick said there and take it a little step further, because I am also so freaking excited about this new mission pack. For those of y'all who have not yet read through the Leviathan missions, and as Nick said, totally possible that some amount of this changes, but this Leviathan mission pack is the most fun set of missions I have ever seen designed ever, and they also seem genuinely like pretty competitively balanced. Here is the part that is the headline that is the most exciting to me. We have been playing with 9 missions and then pick secondaries. That's been the way it's worked. Do y'all know how many missions there are in the Leviathan pack? Do you know how many missions there are?
No.
Hundreds.
There are 540.
Let's go.
There are 5 maps, each of which comes with an objective layout. There are 9 different primaries to choose from, and 12 different additional mission rules, all of which drastically change the mission. Other than the one that does nothing, but obviously that not changing something is itself very different. You could literally go all of 10th edition and never play the same mission twice.
That's high.
That would be entirely plausible. I may have played 540 games of Ninth. I probably did. I definitely did not play 1,080 games of Ninth. Like, the amount of, oh, I absolutely, you know, I've seen this scenario before exactly. It's just not going to happen. You're just not going to be like, oh yeah, of course, I know very well what happens on, you know, table quarters when we're playing the football and we remove all except for the center objective. That's crazy. What the hell is that? You're not. You're going to be thinking about a lot of things. You're going to have seen a lot of these pieces, but almost every single game you play, if you're playing this style of missions, is going to be a brand new thing that you've never seen before, and you're going to have to adapt to it. And that's before you add on the layer of tactical secondaries, which are so much fun. I utterly loved playing with this deck. The back and forth and the push and pull and the, oh wait, suddenly I have to do something totally different. Fascinating. It's so much fun. I love these missions. If the GT pack decides to constrain it a little bit, rein it in a little bit, make them a little bit less as varied, make them score a few more, a few less points, stuff like that, that's cool. But honestly, if it were literally just the Leviathan pack, I think we'd be doing great, which is such a drastic change from the what do you call it? The Eternal War missions, is that what they were in that came with Ninth Edition? Whatever the case, whatever is in the there was previously that was not. We did. You needed the GT pack. You can play Leviathan. It's so much fun, and I don't think the GT pack is going to change much. And I don't think it should because it doesn't need to. It's a great setup. It's very cool. Sweet. Everyone is in the comments telling me about all the stuff that sucks. We'll get to stuff that sucks later. I want to start with stuff that rocks. Cool. Okay. So now that we've gotten sort of a positive note out of the way, sure, let's address kind of the elephant in the room. There are some big problems with 10th, and yeah, sure, let's, for the sake of symmetry, what is the one thing that you are the most concerned about, most upset about? What is the change that you think is ruining the game and we should be burning down the world? Just to put those two things next to each other.
I can go first, Nick, unless anything comes to mind for you right away.
No, go ahead, dude.
I would say that the change I'm most concerned about is just the general lack of symmetry, balance, viableness between the shooting and fight phase. I feel like shooting has just become... I mean, shooting is always inherently stronger because you have to do less things and put your army less out of its way to shoot your opponent than you do to cross the board, charge them, survive Overwatch, fight them, and then survive their punches back. Fight phase is just inherently more dangerous. And they've just toned down the lethality, the amount of tricks you can do in the fight phase, the amount of damage you can do there, your ability to actually take objectives from opponents. It's just down across the board. And like, while I talked about, you know, how less AP means units are surviving more, it's also less AP in melee, and just the ability to actually do things in the fight phase has been drastically reduced, which is super lame in my opinion, because the fight phase is way more fun than the shooting phase in my opinion. And I think a lot of 40k players would agree with me. So that's the thing that I'm most bummed about, is just fight phase doesn't do what it used to by a wide margin. And now we're in shooting meta, which is some of the least fun metas to play, are just parking lot metas, indirect metas. Now it's going to be towering metas. Like, it's just not fun to get blown up no matter what, no matter where you are, by overpowered guns. That's my least favorite thing so far, is the prevalence of the shooting phase.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with Lucas on this. My least favorite thing in 40k is losing in the deployment phase. That's just something that happens a lot when you're learning the game, I feel like. And part of getting good at the game is learning how to deploy properly. And it like feels satisfying when you're like, okay, I like figured out how to like hide from angles. Like I figured out, you know, like if you're playing fixed terrain, like where the hidden spots are. If you're playing player place, like how I can deploy my terrain against these armies, like minimize their alpha turn 1. And just a lot of stuff that they've added in the game definitely feels like you can't do that. Like with towering existing, it doesn't really matter how you deploy your terrain if there's windows in it.
Nick, what I'm hearing is I don't like the fact that you can lose in the deployment phase, and how you deploy doesn't matter. You lose anyway. So sounds like problem solved to me.
I guess so. The other thing too is like, my least favorite rule in the game is indirect fire. I think that they got indirect into a pretty decent spot in 9th. Obviously, like the release of Dessos at the end was like, whoa, what's happening? But like the whole -1 ballistic skill +1 save was really cool, especially because of how -1 ballistic skill interacts with -1 to hits. The fact that they can stack is super nice. I always have been like, yeah, you definitely also shouldn't get like rerolls if you shoot out of line of sight. So it's like a trade-off. Like, yes, you can shoot from total safety, but it's not that efficient. Or you can walk out in the open and it's very efficient, but then you die. Cool trade-off. It was very funny at the start when they're like, hey, we've changed the indirect penalty to be -1 to hit light cover. And I'm like, oof. Okay, well, that's something. I guess they won't take double -1 to hit. And then it felt like every indirect weapon that got printed after that was like, hey, you have +1 to hit and you ignore cover. And I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, why are we printing a universal rule and then giving every platform that can like have access to that, like ignoring that downside? Why even print the downside? I get why GW feels like they need to make indirect good, because after like kind of wrapping my head around the new terrain rules, which for those who don't know, the fact that now you have to have your base wholly within a ruin, so there's no more like tagging the edge of a ruin and unlocking the whole thing. You need to like physically fully be in there, which means it's going to be impossible for most tanks. And also like on some of those like really thin L's that we're used to, it's going to be impossible for like, big base shooting models, like things on like 40s, 50s, 60s, are going to have a really hard time being wholly within to actually shoot. This is going to be a lot more awkward, like walking around or walking through a ruin and then fully exposing yourself. So I feel like in GW's mind, they need to have good indirect in order to, I don't know, help shooting armies, but it feels like shooting is cranked up compared to melee anyway. So it's like, I don't think you need really efficient indirect. Yeah, I think those are my things I'm least excited about so far.
For sure. I'm especially with you on the Desolators, because like with a lot of these indirect guns, it's like, oh, they have heavy and oh, they, can ignore light cover, and that's kind of annoying. The fact that they straight up printed on the Desolator datasheet, they're not heavy, they just ignore the indirect penalty is so insulting. What are we doing? You can play the other ones off as like, oh, they weren't thinking about it. They just screw you. Get shot at.
Sorry.
You muted yourself.
Yeah. Ignoring the indirect penalty on an indirect platform should probably cost a hefty point sum, right?
Oh, of course. That was the thing with Desolators. When they came out, they were like, let's make them real expensive. They were, 45 points a model? Not quite. They were 145 for 5? 35 a model? Yeah. Which was expensive.
35 a model.
And they were confused that they ended up being really solid. So, ostensibly, you make them a little bit better, you would expect their points to go up. That would make sense, right? So how many points did they go up, Nick?
-11?
What?
I think. Did I get that right?
Yeah, they're 24 points a model now.
Yeah.
Did they not sell enough of them? I feel you like.
Well, they don't have them in their own kit yet, so
they're not. Man. Anyway. Yeah. Indirect is definitely a problem. I think that my least favorite thing so far has definitely been. It's definitely the introduction of the towering keyword. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's very silly. It's going to force people to totally change up all of their terrains. Like, we happen to be very lucky that we were playing on Sister's Table yesterday. So, when you're playing on that terrain set, I honestly wonder if Sister's Table was designed with 10th edition in mind, because that seems like the kind of stuff you're going to have to play on with the way that indirect fire works.
Looking good.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Sister's
a lot
Table
of
and
FLG ads online, and I'm like,
yeah, they did just put it out, just put it in color. I'm really glad that our buddy Max is going to leave his Sister's Table with us to use while he moves to Cambodia. It's going to be nice.
Well, let's go, Max.
Yeah. What a legend. You did say that, Max. I hope I'm not misremembering that, because if so, that'd be quite rude of me to call you out on air while you're in the chat.
Don't worry.
But anyway, yeah. But Donald is totally right here. That Sister's Table has a lot of windows on second floors. So, like, the middle... so once the knights get close enough, your dudes in, like, the second rank become really vulnerable. But the giant solid L, very solid. And depending on how you build the mega cathedral thing, can also be very solid. And yeah, I think we were talking about this a little bit more before the show. Towering would be less oppressive if there were either like a range tied to it, or, you know, the reason that I think that it was implemented is because of these changes to obscuring. Because what it means is that if they don't put, because you're never going to fit the full base on the outside lip of a ruin, you're never going to be able to see in through windows by coming up and touching it from the outside, which WTC never let you do in the first place, but is clearly a thing that GW wants you to be able to do. So this lets them actually just, you know, see in. So by having them seeing through second story ruins, they can basically see you once they get close enough to draw the angle right, which is also going to lead to so many arguments. I'm not looking forward to that at all, because line of sight was so easy in 9th. You got out your laser and you were like, I have line of sight or I don't. And now we're going to look at 3D angles. It's going to be a mess. But
all I'm saying, dude, is I'm putting missile hats on all my knights so they can see more easily.
Bro, the autocannon is
free now, right?
mega buff, dude. The autocannon's like an extra inch taller than the missiles.
Yeah. Well, aren't the missiles free now?
Everything is free.
Yeah, there's no reason.
Think whatever you want, dude. Don't think about your list.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, I think the autocannons might even be better than the missiles because they're another inch taller, even if the gun is substantially worse.
The Icarus
Plus, you could pose them like super high angle because they're supposed to be shooting at a flyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not even. I don't even think they're poseable. That's just the angle they sit
this
at.
is already tilting me.
Would you mind showing me the height of your knight in your deployment zone in different places so I can see what angles I'm safe from behind my walls in my DZ?
Yeah. The big thing I think that like you brought up is the headache it creates for TOs. Like, I know every edition, like, the terrain rules change and the TOs have to kind of like craft to terrain or like modify it so that it works well. Because a lot of TOs want to create a functional board because they want people to have a good time playing. They want people to return to their events.
Crazy.
So, I mean, it even got a little awkward in, what was it? There was that moment in 9th edition where we heard FLG was going to be instituting first floor blocking on some ruins. So we tried it out here at some tournaments, and even then it was like kind of awkward. And now it's like, it kind of feels like, yeah, you're going to have first floor blocking. I mean, like what you're saying, everything has no windows in order to make towering not like super oppressive. Which mega sucks for knights because like they're pointed around and designed around towering, and
no, they're not. No, they're not.
Good
they're
thing.
not.
No, you don't think
they gave Imperial Knights the best buff they could ever ask for to ignore the one thing that's supposed to fundamentally keep them in check, and they all got cheaper. The Knight build right now went from 2 bigs and 5 littles to 3 bigs and 5 littles.
Well, I guess they're just trying to push knights, dude. I don't know.
I see these Imperial Knights lists and I lose my freaking mind. The stratagems that knights have and the enhancements they have are so damn good. Oh my gosh.
Their arm ability is also
Have you read
insane.
the knight stratagems, Lucas?
Yes, but I don't really remember them.
There's like, I think it's 1 CP. All of your armigers get +1 like strength, AP, and damage against a unit. All of them. On
I think it's
all
strength
of their
and
weapons.
AP, and then you get +1 damage if you're honored or whatever. They have a lot of like do an extra effect if you're honored.
Yeah.
Which
I gotta say, I think they nailed the quests this time. That it's kill the warlord and hold your opponent's home field objective. Those are way cooler than the old quests, which were super stupid.
Yes. Do something automatically, get massively rewarded for it. That was stupid.
Yeah. I also love that it's like, all right, who's your warlord? And it's like, all right, that guy's gonna hide. He's like playing against knights is like playing conversion now. You're like suddenly the warlord goes from absolutely who cares whatever to the most important thing ever. Let's keep him off the table for 3
Sure
turns.
hope you aren't playing the Silent King.
Well, you weren't anyway because he's bad.
Yes, spoiler alert. Yeah. You won't.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to continue the Knights Malting train, but
Yeah, for sure.
they seem pretty silly.
Definitely. Let's then, and then there's a third category. So we're talking about things that we're very excited about, things that we think are very bad, and then let's each go for like a hot take. What is something that you either think people are thinking is good but is actually bad, or, and I'm going to encourage this one, things that people think are fundamentally terrible but are actually probably not that bad.
Do you have
I feel like
someone to start?
There's a lot of panic
this.
there, yeah, for sure. I think that people's freak out about lethality is entirely unwarranted so far. I think that there are definitely a number of units that are very silly, that need substantial reining in. And in spite of that, I think that the lethality in the game has fallen off a cliff. Right? The amount of output that exists on the vast majority of datasheets doing normal stuff, even with solid combos, just doesn't break things the way that it used to. Like Lucas was talking about, earlier, AP is way down. Save values are like you're taking saves. They got rid of the 3-ups turn into 2-ups from cover thing for a good reason, because nothing would have died if they didn't put that in.
God, that is such an amazing change.
Yeah, that was a great rule. That's way down. I think that so that is my hot take. And also here. Oh, you know what? Even more than that, here's my hotter take, which shouldn't be that hot of a take. The speed with which GW has put out a couple of hot fixes is blinding. I am so impressed. The Deathwatch index dropped. Everyone gravitated to the utter nonsense combo, and it was fixed in less than 24 hours. I have never seen a faster hotfix from GW ever. The edition is not even out yet, and they are fixing things. That bodes so well in my mind for the edition. There were a number of changes that were made to Eldar, according to people who were under NDAs, who had insider information, that happened between little bits starting to leak out and the actual release. They didn't even release it. They dropped D-cannons from you're taking 9 to you're taking 3. They radically increased the price. They decreased the squad size of Warwalkers. They radically increased the price. Like, there are things that are going to slip through the cracks when you rewrite an entire edition and write every data sheet and every stratagem. There's going to be stupid things that happen, especially when they have to keep their playtesting teams so tight, because we as a community have shown ourselves entirely incapable of not leaking everything like a boat full of bullet holes. And fixing stuff at that pace bodes fantastically. We could see 7 more things change between now and the end of June, and I would not be surprised. And again, the edition is not out yet. Right? It comes out next weekend. So I am very, very excited about seeing that from them. And a lot of the doom and gloom about oh my gosh, these 3 or 4 are very obvious things, very clearly need fixing. Like, let's see what happens. There's a lot to be concerned about, but seeing that was a very good sign in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm also super excited to see how they continue with the quarterly bounce patches. That was something that they got, I think, really good at doing last edition. It was the most bounce, the most regular bounce updates the game had ever seen, which was super cool. And I've heard, some people say that they're also going to be doing more points. It was kind of annoying that they were only doing points every 6 months. So hearing that they're more willing to do points every 3 months is super good.
Yeah, points are just so the easiest lever to fix things that don't have to involve weird hoops and buggy nerfs and stuff. To just say, hey, that thing's a little too good. That thing's not quite good enough. We're fixing it. Moving on.
I think my hot take is going to be kind of in the same vein as yours, where you're saying people are focusing on the lethality of a few units. So mine's kind of the opposite of that, where it's I feel like there's a lot of stuff that people are calling bad and unplayable. And my first gut reaction to reading the Necron Codex was this does not beat Marines or Eldar. But we know that those are two overtuned codexes. At least they have overtuned combos within them or overtuned units within them. And yeah, you're probably your random unit in one codex is probably not going to beat the best things in the game. And I mean, that's kind of always how 40k has been. There's always this, rise and fall of certain units and certain factions because of that. But once you step away from those and kind of look at the rest of the pool that people are playing with, which is most of the game, your stuff's going to stack up pretty well to that. It is unfortunate that you're definitely sitting, if your goal is to go out there and win a tournament tomorrow and you're playing Votan or something like that, and there's 5 Marine players in the room, sorry, you're probably not going to win that tournament. In maybe 3 more months when things have been balanced, hopefully the power level of those indexes are closer to each other. But I would say definitely look for some creative stuff within your indexes. Don't just fixate on the highest power level units. While GW has definitely shown us that they will continue to release cranked units without really understanding them, they do a pretty decent job of toning them in eventually. And this is a new edition. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to figure out still. So yeah, that's kind of what I have to keep telling myself. It's just stop comparing yourself to the best shit in the game. If you really care about it, then just go play the best shit in the game. That sort of thing.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. I think that tail end of 9th, you probably weren't beating Iron Hands no matter what you were playing. And for a hot minute there as well, you weren't beating Guard, right? Those were just sort of expectations that a very good player on those armies were just going to smash you. Cool. Those 2 armies are now Marines and Eldar. I don't I think that the gap between those has widened and will definitely need to be brought down, but I don't think having 2 armies that are head and shoulders above the rest of everyone else is some crazy new thing. It sucks. It should get fixed. I really hope that GW will make changes to address it. But to say that this is some sort of unprecedented territory and we've gone from perfect harmony to utter chaos is just not an accurate reflection of the situation, in my opinion. Is it less balanced? Maybe. Totally plausible. But again, we're already getting hot fixes. Let's see what it looks like. And the not, if we're talking about haves and have-nots, or I think it'd be more reasonable to say the reasonable armies and the not reasonable armies. The reasonable armies all seem like a ton of fun to play into each other. Mechanics are super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Lucas? Have you got a hot take for the audience?
Been trying to think of one. I'm not usually the best at figuring out what's good or what's bad or what's a hot take very quickly. So I don't know if I have a hot take, but I would just encourage people to try different units in their index if they're not feeling super hot on, where the edition is right now, or they're feeling frustrated by certain things. Just literally try one of every unit, see what feels good. You can still make progress on list building. You can still make progress on figuring out what's good in your index, what good rules have synergy, just by trying things. And then, like Tyler was saying, we have haves and have-nots. So if you're feeling frustrated playing into the haves, just play against some buddies that are all playing armies that don't have insane rules yet, and then you can kind of figure out where the meta is going to be after the most insane stuff gets fixed. I think it is pretty silly to expect GW to solve all the problems super quickly, and also to not have any problems in their game from square one when they redesign, a game with I don't know if we have thousands of data sheets, but
We do have thousands of data sheets, yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of data sheets, hundreds and hundreds of stratagems, rules, enhancements, army abilities, to get them all balanced and then to fix them all into a balanced state immediately after release. That's just like, I feel like that's pretty silly when they've already got tons of stuff going on. So like, just be patient, calm down. We're literally 5 days into learning rules. Just like, relax. That's my take on it anyway. I think people are getting way too bent out of shape about something that came out -5 days ago.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think you're definitely right about going and just trying stuff. I think a lot of people are looking at data sheets from the perspective of how was this in 9th versus how is it in 10th? And they're like utterly disappointed when it got nerfed. Which like I do not think is the correct mindset to be approaching this stuff. Look at these data sheets with fresh eyes. We're playing a different game with very different methods of scoring and a lot of different rules interactions and a fundamentally different expectation of damage output. If your unit doesn't obliterate anything in the game anymore, cool. The hope is that nothing does. If it does useful, reliable damage, and especially if it has a decent durability, get very excited about that. I think one of the biggest example units of this in my mind right now is Aberrants from GSC. Aberrants are, output-wise, basically the same as they were in 9th. For more points after the latest points changes. And their durability is, just comparing data sheets, pretty comparable. We lose -1 damage. We pick up the 4-up Feel No Pain instead of access to a 5-up Feel No Pain. We get the -1 to wound. They're a little bit more durable. They hit exactly as hard, 2 or 3 attacks. I might have one extra check. Anyway, it's very minor changes. It's a points hike. And Aberrants are insane. They're so good. Oh my god. This unit hits like a truck, and it does not die, no matter how much stuff you throw at it. And I think it would have been fine in 9th. Would have been fine. So, come at stuff with fresh eyes. Be willing to try and experiment with new things. And you may be surprised by what units fill what roles in what ways. It's very exciting.
I personally have a lot of fun with those kind of units. I think it's fun, we kind of categorize units into this is a objective completion type unit. This is a backfield holder. This is a shooting unit. This is a fast unit. This is a skirmishing unit. This is a melee damage unit. I think we really haven't had, I could just be totally misremembering because of bad memory, but I think we haven't had a lot of tank tough units in 9th edition. I think part of that was due to the way morale worked, the odds of losing a significant portion of your tanky meat shield unit to morale was warranted you not just flat out not taking it. But I'm really excited to see units like that come back, hopefully, in this new edition. Units like Aberrants, units like Lich Guard. It's not nearly as tanky, but units like the Orc Pigs, where they're just super tough, bunch of wounds, feel no pain, hard to put down, and now they don't run away either. I'm really excited to see those kind of units come back, and I hope there's a lot more, just brawls between those kind of units, because I think those are really fun.
Yeah. That would be pretty cool. We definitely had some tanky units in 9th edition, but it was more this gets tanky and then new thing gets released that deletes the tanky unit at the time.
But also things that were tanky in a literally indestructible kind of way.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is what Lucas is talking about here. Like Deathwing Terminators were stupid. You could not kill them. Full stop for most armies. That's just not happening.
Or
Whereas
Terminator brick.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's just not happening.
Transitman, no rerolls, -2 wound, feel no pain. It's woo, okay.
Yeah, it's don't even bother. Especially because they almost all came with revives.
Yeah.
I feel like the expectation that any unit that's tanky has these slow every turn getting a dude back is not the reality. Necrons are a very different situation. They get a lot of dudes back, but that's kind of their faction identity. But whereas like with the Aberrants, it was like, oh man, you killed a couple of them, and you're wearing them down, and you're getting through the unit slowly but surely, and their output is coming down as the dudes die. It felt like a durable unit. It was super cool, and didn't feel like an, oh my gosh, there's literally nothing I can do to even scratch the paint. And they do come back on a 4-up when the whole unit dies. It is Genestealer cult. It's very fun, but there's counterplay to that in a way that there isn't to you just can't kill it, and it keeps coming back. Yeah. Speaking of, you guys want to jump into some things that you're excited about from each of our factions?
Let's do it.
Oh yeah.
Sweet. Nick, I know you've been blowing up chats talking about some of how exciting some of this new stuff is about Necrons. What's going on over in your world? And you're welcome to mention Votan if you want.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Votan later. I think the Necrons are more exciting, so we should start with them first. Yeah, I mean, my initial impression, like I mentioned earlier, of Necrons was reading them. I'm like, this is not as strong as Marines or Eldar, and I was like, how the hell am I supposed to stand up to them? And I mean, the short answer is like probably through mission play. For me, I'm someone who likes to see the whole picture before I like make my final judgments, and I'm also a lot better. I feel like I'm a very visual learner, so I really have to like sit down and play the game against those kind of things and see it on the table and see how it feels. That's why I'm not like a huge fan of like averages and stuff like that. I'm just like, yeah, that like sure that's cool, but like I need to like play a few games and like get like an actual like visualize this in my mind sort of thing. So on paper, it definitely looks like Necrons just get blown off the board by someone who's like, hey, I'm going to spend 3 6s on 3 devastating wound combos and do 26 mortals to you. And I'm like, all right, cool, man. Like, what do I have that stands up against that? I don't. But like, who knows? That might not actually happen in a game, Hopefully not. But looking at it again more and more, there's like I especially looked at it once we got points, like which units went down a lot, which units got cheaper, and like the abilities that they come, because like a lot of the strength now is in like the abilities on the data sheet. So I mean, the first thing I was immediately drawn to with Necrons was Lich Guard. Lich Guard, I saw them at 19 points a model, and I thought that was a typo or something, and had to zoom in. And yes, it was actually Lich Guard at 19 points a model. These guys were pretty cool last edition. I feel like they were takeable during Nephilim, but they weren't the strongest option. They were just good. They were like, I think like 26, 25 points a model when 9th edition came out. And they were T5, 2-up, 4-up, 2 wounds. And then they eventually went down to like 22, I believe. So seeing them at 19, especially in this edition where lethality has been toned down, is super cool. Because like T5 seems pretty decent. 3-up armor instead of 2-up is what it is. But 4-up Invuln seems really good. And then the amount of like healing that Necrons have access to seems quite strong. So
Could you walk us through some of these combos here? Because every time someone asks me how durable Necrons are, I say go read these like 8 things, and I forget what they all do, but I know they're all crazy. So how does this all fit together?
Yeah. So the unfortunate part about the Necron reanimations is they combined it with living metal, which means it does activate in your command phase. So we're kind of back to you need to survive a whole battle round to heal. With one exception, there is one stratagem you can access in your opponent's phase. It is called Protocol the Undying Legions. It is after an opponent finishes opponent's unit finishes making its attacks against one of your units, it can immediately reanimate, which heals D3. And if a character is in the unit, it heals D3 +1. So there's a little bit of healing, which is nice. So you don't just get completely blown off the board. So the healing in your command phase, though, how reanimation protocols work is you basically just heal D3, I believe, at the end of your command phase. And the cool thing is if you have no wounded units in the squad, it then starts bringing back dead models and healing wounds from them. So it works really well with multi-wound models as well, and single wound models, which is a cool balance, because in the past, reanimation has always been really good on multi in 8th edition, really good on single in 9th edition. And now they've kind of found a good balance, which is cool. So the combos with Lich Guard that make them super good is Lich Guard have this rule that if a noble is in their unit, they get -1 to be wounded, just full stop. Not the whole transhuman thing where it's -1 if it's greater than your toughness. So that means strength 5 wounds them on 5s, strength 4 or less wounds them on 6s, and then higher than strength 5, something that wins on 3s would win on 4s, something that wins on 2s would win on 3s. Makes them very tanky. The other thing that you can throw in there is you can throw a Technomancer in there, and he is my pick for best Cryptech. There's like all the Cryptechs got pretty good with the exception of the Psychomancer. But the Technomancer gives the unit that he's in a 5-up Feel No Pain, which is super cool. So now this -1 to be a wounded unit, 5-up Feel No Pain, 20 wounds on that. Pretty strong. And then the last thing you can throw in there if you really want to is Cryptothralls, which are a 2-man 40-point unit that can join a unit provided that a Cryptech is leading that unit. And then they become a part of the bodyguard unit, according to their data sheet. So now you have 2 more bodies that are 2 wounds apiece. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, they have a Feel No Pain. They have a 4-up Feel No Pain base. So now you have 4 wounds on a 4-up Feel No Pain, which is super cool. And they have a rule that says when a model in their unit dies on a 3-up, it may fight on death. And because the Cryptothralls become a part of the bodyguard unit, they're going to confer that role to the Lich Guard, which the Shield Lich Guard don't hit that hard. It's 3 attacks at 6-2-1. But, I mean, like if someone's running like a, kind of like objective flipping unit into you, or some sort of like, melee like tarp hit, 3 attacks at 6-2-1 per guy, might chop through that. So being able to get some value out of them if your opponent tries to like pressure them seems really good, because a lot of Krons, I think their weakness right now is just getting like pressured in melee. And that's kind of just been Kron's weakness historically. So yeah, so that's the Lich Guard unit. That whole combo is pretty expensive. It's like $375. So like there might be some more efficient things in there later where it's like maybe the Cryptothralls aren't that good. Maybe you downgrade the Overlord to a Lord. I guess, yeah, I just talked about the Overlord versus the Lord. Haven't really talked about that. So those are the 2 like nobles you could slap in there. You could also slap the name noble in there. My preference is the Overlord, because the Overlord's 85 as opposed to 65. So for 20 more points, you get a better character. He's like T5 instead of T4. He's like 6 wounds on a 2-up, 4-up, -1 damage. So he's like pretty tanky. A normal Lord is like 4 wounds on a 3-up armor and nothing else. The normal Lord gives the unit +1 move, which is nice because the Lich Guard are slow, 5 inches each, and also lets you use stratagems if you're battle shocked, which is cool. But the Overlord has that Space Marines captain thing, which is he can use a stratagem for free on the unit once per battle round, which is really good because that heal stratagem I was talking about, after you take damage, you can just use that for free. Or like maybe start of your turn. Uh-oh, I failed battle shock. Well, 1 CP insane bravery, but it's actually 0. Lol. Or you could like heroic for free. So gives you a lot of options. Yeah, so that whole combo, Overlord, Techno, Cryptothralls, Lich Guard, sounds really fun. I want to try 20. I wrote a list today with 30 to try. Might be too many, but I'm very excited.
Zandrek.
Yes. So the other Overlord option,
He's
one of the
so
named Overlords.
good.
So I think I have him over here. Yeah, here he is. For all of our listeners out there, I'm holding up Nemesaur Zandrek.
Let's go.
This ancient Finecast model that I have been enamored with since 7th edition. Ever since I found out he could change his Warlord trait every turn. Super cool. Anyways, I didn't play Necrons in 7th. I didn't own them. But I owned them in 8th, and my buddy Max got me Zandrek, and I was super excited until I saw his rules, and he was terrible in 8th edition. And then, he was really good at the start of 8th edition when you could Deep Strike turn 1, but we weren't playing then. He was still pretty bad in 9th edition because he was locked to a bad sub-faction. And now that sub-factions don't exist, he's pretty decent. So Zandrek doesn't give you the free stratagem, and he's not -1 damage. He is way less tanky than an Overlord, and he hits way worse than an Overlord. But the cool thing that he does is he gives you access to Vect. And Vect is very strong this edition because people don't start on any CP. And currently, as it works, because that's how it worked last edition, if someone wants to use a stratagem for 0 CP, it sets the cost to 0, and then Vect increases the cost by 1.
For people who may be kind of just jumping in on 10th who didn't play a ton of 9th, what do you mean by Vect?
So Vect was a stratagem that Dark Eldar used to have in 8th edition, which was permanently increase the cost of a stratagem by 1, I believe.
After your opponent uses it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't increase that use, but all future uses of that stratagem cost 1 more. So it really dissuades repeated use of a certain stratagem.
Yep. And there's a ton of this repeat a stratagem for free I've been seeing. So all of a sudden, when people's game plan hinges around repeating the same stratagem 3 times for free, like my list, for example, someone going like no, that's 1 CP now, can be backbreaking because you're only getting 1 CP a player turn. So 2 a battle round. There's not a lot of CP regen either from what I've seen. I mean, obviously, you'll probably be talking about yours in a second, but very, like, I don't think there's a single CP regen in Necrons. So there's the CP Jenner from Emotech, which makes him a decent choice. But the cool thing I like about Zondrek is he's 85 points, so he's the exact same cost as an Overlord. I thought he'd be more because he gives you Vect, but yeah. And the last big combo that I want to talk about Necrons that some people here in the comments have been mentioning is the Reanimator is finally good. So this unit was something released in Indomitus. It's this super cool looking unit. It's like this tall, spindly walker. And unfortunately, I've been using mine as a paperweight for the past 3 years, but now I'm encouraged to build my other 2 because this unit gives off a 12-inch aura of every time your Necrons reanimate, they reanimate D3 more. So that Lichguard unit that gets hit can spend 0 CP with the Overlord to heal 2d3 plus 1 immediately. And then if your opponent doesn't wipe it out, it heals 2d3 in your command phase. Then a Technomancer in the squad will go, hey, I'll heal a wounded guy if there's one in there for D3. And then in your opponent's command phase, if you have a Resorb, which is free, by the way, and you should definitely put it on your Overlord. And if you're, cheaping out and you're taking a Lord, don't worry, you can still take a Resorb. You can reanimate again for another 2d3. And if you're getting real crazy and you brought a Catacomb Command Barge, he can point at that unit and res them again for another 2d3. So basically, Krons are like crazy. You need to wipe them out in one turn, because if you don't, they're back.
And how about warriors?
Warriors are interesting. So 10-mans don't feel tanky enough in my mind.
Nah, screw that.
They're
Get
T4 4-up armor, right? With the changes to how you get cover too, because in order to get cover, you need to be like wholly within a ruin now, right?
Wholly within or at all obscured by. It's very easy to get.
So like behind it, yeah. But like if you're trying, you can't like sit on the outside of a ruin like on an objective super easily if the lip isn't big enough. Like you can have some guys in the back towing cover, which is cool. So you definitely are going to want to get cover with your warriors to put them on that 3-up. But the issue with warriors in my mind, and I could be wrong, I definitely think there's a build out there with like 60 warriors in Xeris, is they went up. So they're, and I mean, yeah, I guess in the context of the game, there's probably a reason why they went up. But they're 12 points a model, so it's 240 points for the unit before any upgrades. And it's like a decently tanky unit. Like if your opponent can't kill it, it heals a ridiculous amount because every time they heal D6 instead of D3, and then the reanimator would let them heal an additional D3. And if they're on an objective you control, they'll heal D3 plus 3 instead of 6. So the warriors are very much like, if you can't kill them, they just come back. But I'm a lot more worried about their tankiness compared to Lichguard, because like Lichguard with that invuln with that -1 to wound is very strong. If you want to make warriors tanky, you're going to have to probably invest Technomancers into them, which all of a sudden that 240 point unit's now 300 points. I don't know if investing an Overlord in them is worth it or not. The heal is pretty cool. So I think that, yeah, warriors, it's going to be like maybe one squad of 20 with a bunch of Lichguard, or it's going to be like a squad of Lichguard with a bunch of warriors is kind of my idea. It's, do you want to invest in a Lichguard or do you want to invest in a warriors? Because they both want the similar characters, I think. Now, what makes warriors super cool is Illuminar Xeris, like the named Cryptek guy. He has a 6-inch aura of AOC for battle line, which makes those warriors much, much tankier. And it's also a 6-inch aura of increase their AP by 1. So, yeah. What I've kind of heard from some initial reports of people is that warrior damage output feels very low for their points, which, I mean, makes sense. I feel like Necron's identity is kind of like low damage output, very tanky is kind of what they're going for. But, I mean, we'll have to see if that's good, because the downside is if you go up against someone with like crazy high damage output, they're just going to race you and your army's going to disappear after like 3 turns. So, yeah, there's a lot of cool combos, as like Donald here is pointing out in the chat. The Ghost Arc's really cool. The Ghost Arc is after a warrior unit nearby takes like a casualty, like at the end of your opponent's activation, the Ghost Arc can point and click at a warrior unit once per turn to reanimate it instantly. So it's that stratagem basically strapped to a unit, which is cool. Oricon is a crypt tech you could take. So if you don't want to 5-up Feel No Pain, you could take Oricon, who gives the whole unit a 4-up invuln, which is also pretty cool. So there's a lot of cool combos with the characters. I really like that the Necron like characters are important. They try to do that a lot last edition with command protocols, where it's like you have to stay within 6 inches of your character to get this buff. But the buffs like weren't super impactful, and it was like kind of awkward to do it, especially because Kron's last edition were so much more of like a melee book that you didn't have characters fast enough to keep up with like Scorpex and Wraiths. This edition, Necrons definitely seem like a lot more of a sit around shooting book, like come into my den and I will blast you with close range guns and also countercharge you with my melee units. A lot of Necron melee units lost movement, which I think is pretty cool, leaning into their identity as a slow army. But I do think it is unfortunate because it didn't feel like gun ranges really went down in comparison. So yeah, I don't think you're going out there. The days of the glorious Scorpec charges on your opponent's side of the board, I think, are over. I think it is wait for your opponent to come over and then pounce on them with Scorpex or Wraiths if you're bringing them. Or just stand there with your unkillable Lich Guard and see what happens.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the thing that we've seen across the board that we haven't talked about yet, is that movement ranges went down big time. Between movement going down big, the fly keyword getting the boot, and all the changes as to the specifics of combat movement, they want the game's movement to get toned down substantially. And from a big picture perspective, I think that was a really good goal. I think that movement in 9th edition got way out of hand. Things went way too fast, way too many times, way over the place. And making you be a little bit more impactful with positioning and careful movement, as opposed to just, oh, I go infinity inches later anyway, so why does it matter? I think is going to result in a much more technical and thoughtful game. So I'm excited about that. We can argue about the implementation later, but big picture is something I wanted to comment on.
I think
you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
No.
Why'd you shoot me in the front?
I didn't. I think Lucas pressed Shift 3 accidentally. But anyway, continue.
So, yeah, I think kind of to end with the Kron's discussion, the biggest mistake you could make with list building, which, I mean, you should definitely experiment and try stuff out. But I think the biggest trap you might find yourself into is if you're like, man, my army's just dying. You might have invested too much in just units that stand around and don't die, and not enough in units that actually threaten your opponent. I think the Kron game plan is very much going to be, at least like this is my rudimentary thing, this is what I'm going to try to start. It's going to be put tanky units somewhere. Your opponent has to come deal with it. They commit units to deal with it. They, I don't know, don't kill it, haha. And then you counterpunch them with some sort of guns that you have waiting in the wings or some sort of melee units you have waiting in the wings. And if you don't have those units to kill them, then your opponent's just going to sit there and they're going to keep punching you / keep shooting you until you die. And that's it. So definitely looking at like DDAs, for example, I think they got a huge glow up. 72-inch range is a very good range on that gun. D6+1 blast means that they threaten tanks, and they also threaten like elite units pretty well at 15-4-4. If you ever can get them into a point where they like set up these good shooting alleys, they'll get +1 to hit and devastating wounds for standing still. But I like that you don't get mega punished by them moving. You still have the big shots if you move. Trying to think of what else is really good punching. I think Scorpex are still decent. I know we were talking about unit sizes a little bit earlier, at least some people in the chat were. It is unfortunate that now you have to take a lot of stuff in like their box sizes. Like you can take 3 or you can take 6. Because I think like 6 Scorpex is too much of an investment for like a generic counterpunch unit. And I think 3 is a little bit too little. But maybe try out with some of these smaller unit sizes, like 3-mans, right? And like you don't need to absolutely one-shot whatever charged you. I think since a lot of 9th edition, we're used to a lot of things one-shotting other things. When it doesn't happen that much in 10th, we're going to be very surprised. But I feel like that's kind of how the game is designed. Things aren't supposed to one-shot other things. So just being able to send something in that can take a good chunk out. So now it's like you outnumber them on the objective and they just kind of slowly die with you. I think that's going to be pretty good. Also, Catan looked like pretty decent countercharge units, like the Nightbringer and the Void Dragon do, especially. Nightbringer seems like he slaps pretty well. Them having reanimation is very funny because they're T11, 4-up invul, and have damage. So if your opponent can't kill them, they can just basically full heal next turn as long as the Reanimator's nearby. And that Technomancer can walk up and heal them for D3 at the ending room of his too, which is pretty cool. So putting some sort of damage in your list, whether it be big gun or some like smaller melee counterpunch units, I think is going to be essential. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with Necrons. I'm excited. Other stuff, I think the King's bad. Sorry, he's too expensive. His buffs don't do enough. He moves 7 now, which is, and talking about fly changes, he's got fly, which doesn't mean anything this edition. Yeah, so run more stuff. It's really easy to run out of points if you want to try to make these unkillable units. So try to think of efficient combinations. Come up with cool combos. Try them out. There's a lot of cool stuff.
Very cool. Sweet. Lucas, how do I feel about greenskins? And maybe Chaos Knights, we don't talk about that as well.
Sure, I'll briefly touch on Chaos Knights first because I've thought a lot less about them, and I think they're a lot less interesting. Yeah, I mean, CK got some really cool stuff. Unfortunately, they are, in my mind, still a shooting book through and through, but we'll talk about kind of why that is in the next minute or two. The biggest thing for them is the Night Tyrant. I'd say the two biggest winners are the Night Tyrant and the War Dog Brigand. The Brigand just got +1 ballistic skill for no discernible reason at all. I guess it has 2 guns, but that's not a good rule because the Executioner has 2 guns and it's ballistic skill 3. The Brigand shoots ridiculously hard. It makes up for the Chain Cannon AP going down by 1 by getting +1 AP against the closest target. And the Melta gun is now strength 12. So unlike other Melta that doesn't quite wound tanks as well as it used to, which amazing change, by the way, thank goodness. Melta was way too powerful in 9th edition. The Melta Lance on the War Dogs is now close range, but very impactful, which I feel like is exactly what it should be. So Brigand is very good at shooting the Melta and is definitely one of the bigger winners from our codex. We also got free Havoc launchers and their 501 Blast. Blast is one of the most powerful weapon keywords out there, in my opinion. Up there, not up there with devastating wounds, but like just getting more shots. If their goal is to tune down the amount of anti-infantry in the game, they have definitely failed because, good lord, Blast is ridiculous. But yeah, Havoc launcher pretty good. Brigand pretty good. The Night Tyrant is insane. As far as we can tell, it can get cover even though it's towering. I don't see anything in the core rules that would prevent that. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but a 2-up Night Tyrant. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the way that cover is written currently, as best as I understand it, if you are a big thing, you are in cover all the time.
Cool. Even if you're towering.
Yes, even if you're towering, probably even more so.
Right, because you're just so damn big. Yeah, so you take this Tyrant, you give him AOC for his relic, and then you sit behind terrain, and all of a sudden you have a 0+ armor save knight who's giving cover to all of your baby knights because, well, they probably had it already, but like if they didn't, then haha, now they do. And then he shoots you from behind walls because that's the new fun way towering interacts. So I don't know what's better, the Castellan, quote unquote, or the Valiant, quote unquote. But the Tyrant is awesome, and he should probably be in most Chaos Knight lists, although I have not played with him yet. So yeah, that's Chaos Knights. Their best stuff is still shooting. They got walk through walls, which is really good. Yeah, that's basically it. So Orcs. Orcs are definitely kind of middle of the pack for index releases for 10th. They got some really cool stuff. In terms of like faction identity things, the WoW got toned down big time, which is a big bummer. But we got a bunch of cool rules to compensate for it. One of the biggest like kind of changes was Beast Nagas lost the invuln and in exchange gained a bunch of Feel No Pains. So basically the Feel No Pains replaced the invulns. And spoiler alert, the Feel No Pains are way better because you get to take them in addition to your armor save. And everything has one. So like the Kill Rig is a 6-up, the Hunter Rig is a 6-up. Those are definitely like not the best Beast Naga units. But Boys have a 6-up. All of the mounted type units have at least a 5+ feel no pain. So pigs have a 5 at feel no pain at toughness 7, which is just such an awkward offensive profile to try to wound correctly. And sorry, defensive profile. And then both the mounted war bosses, so Mozrog and the generic Squig boss, have a 4 up feel no pain, and they're also toughness 10. So the Beast Naga stuff is crazy tanky. Its damage went down a little bit, I would say, because of just reductions in AP meant that all their AP2 weapons went to AP1, which is not ideal for us. But they're just so tanky, and they have great anti-vehicle and anti-monster abilities that I think that most Orc melee lists should be running lots of Beast Nagas. They remain our premier offensive melee units, and like most lists should have a whole bunch of them. We also lost Here We Go, and Beast Nagas have the one workaround for that, in that the Squig boss gives off a 6-inch aura of Here We Go for Beast Nagas. So that is a really insane aura that I think most Orc players should try to be taking advantage of. A lot of people have been talking about Flash Gits. They're really good. I haven't seen them shoot too many times, so I don't know if they're an insane unit that you want multiple of. I think one unit with Badruck is probably a staple for its price. Also, it is a multi-purpose unit. They are Orcs at the end of the day, so they can also wade in and get stuck in melee really well. The unit has 50 attacks at 6/11, so that's a shooting unit, by the way. And
Wog,
good, Mr. Vaughn. And then the Badruck also. I mean, his Chapter Master ability only works in ranged, unfortunately. If it worked in melee, that would be awesome. But
what about his aura?
He's got a 6-inch aura of -1 to enemy infantry toughness. So with a lot of Orc strength going down just a little bit, you can oftentimes use this to push yourself back up a wound bracket, which is really nice. So Badruck and 10 Flash Gits, I feel like, are an auto include. Any more than that, I'm not super convinced. They lose a lot for not having Chapter Master, but at least one unit will definitely be being trialed by myself, and I think a lot of Orc players the next little while. So Flash Gits are great, Beast Nagas are great. The truck is 50 points for 10 toughness 8 wounds with a 6-up invul. I mean, I think the truck is excellent. It basically just staples 10 tough wounds on whatever unit you want to try to deliver. So I'm personally going to be cramming mine full of Beast Naga boys. If our local meta is full of indirect, I'm going to be cramming Gretchen in them. Flash Gits go in there very well. I'm eager to try Knobs. Knobs are -1 to wound when the war boss is riding with them, so that's a fun combo. So I'm going to be trying that out today. All those units are really good. I won't say that. I don't know if that's true yet. But overall feeling pretty confident about where Orcs are. Overall, the general archetype still feels like you want to be really aggressive, get up in your opponent's face, and just put more stuff directly in their face that they can deal with in a turn, which is really cool. And I think that's what Orcs should play like at all times. Overall feeling pretty confident about where Orcs are. We have, oh my god, we went from having terrible stratagems throughout our book to having some utterly incredible stratagems just in time for CP to go down to 0. But the Orc stratagems, guys, are absolutely insane. I love how simple they are too, because there's like 1 or 2 that aren't that good, but the 3 best ones are do way more melee damage, move way faster so you can get into melee, and then be tough as hell. So 1 CP on demand, -1 to wound, is just so good. That's an amazing stratagem. And then the mobility one as well, +2 advance and charge, also incredible.
You can't forget the best Orc stratagem, though.
Fight on death? Oh, mob rule, baby.
Let's go, brother.
1 CP, do nothing. Nice.
Yeah.
Thought it was useful class edition? Psych.
For those of y'all that don't know, as written currently, mob rule is in the command phase, so as in the command phase step of the command phase, because this is one thing that is like a nitpicky thing that I don't like about 10th, that I don't think I've heard people talk about. There are 2 command phases. I don't know why they decided there isn't a morale phase and instead decided that there is the command phase, in which there's the first part where anything that says it happens in the command phase has to happen. And then there's the second part, which is definitely still part of the command phase for some reason. But none of the command phase things happen. We just do battle shock. And then stuff that happens at the end of the command phase happens after that. Why we couldn't have just had a battle shock phase after the command phase, I don't know. But that's nitpicky. So what Mob Rule does is it's 1 CP and it gives a unit of 10 or more, a unit of more than 10. What's the
Yeah, you pick a unit that's like has
above
10
half
or
strength,
more models.
10 or more, something like that.
There's something about 10 models, but like you give off a 6-inch aura for that unit of.
You can be affected by stratagems even if you're battle shocked.
Right, until the end of the phase.
Exactly, until the end of the phase, and you can only use it in the command phase. Now, as a reminder, if you're battle shocked, that stops being the case at the start of your command phase. So none of your units will be battle shocked unless they became battle shocked during your command phase. Not during the battle shock step, because you can't use this stratagem at that point in time, only before that. And in addition, even if for some reason this has happened, like you got Shadows in the Warped or something, the only stratagems that Orcs can use in the command phase are CP reroll, which shouldn't be relevant, Careen, which really shouldn't be relevant. If your own vehicles are exploding in your command phase, something has gone terribly wrong. Or auto pass. But you can't. You're not battle. So if you're already battle shocked, auto pass doesn't do anything because you still count as being battle shocked, despite passing a battle shock test. If you became battle shocked in that command phase, that's spelled out in the designer's commentary. So this stratagem literally does nothing. They're gonna fix it. It's gonna last longer, I'm sure. But for the moment, it's very funny.
I think the intention is that it lasts throughout the turn, so that if you stick by an orc unit that's above half strength, even if you're battle shocked, you can use stratagems throughout the whole turn. Which still doesn't sound that useful to me, but at least it does something, right?
Cool. Anything else you want to say about Orcs?
No, I'm excited. Yeah, I think they're gonna be solid. I think there's a lot to explore, and get your beast snagging stuff out, boys. It's time to crunch.
Let's go.
It's good to be green, boys. It's good to be green.
It is wonderful to be green.
Sick. Talk a little bit about bugs. Oh my gosh. What a day to be a Genestealer cult player. Whew. I assumed that we were going to horny jail this edition because of how much crazy nonsense we got up to last edition. And my brothers in Christ, in Forearmed Christ in particular, that is not the case. GSC, on the previews, I assumed we're going to be like anemic damage to compensate for the fact that we get, infinite units. And it was going to be a lot of Trixie trading units for points, getting units back to trade for points again, trying to wick away a little bit of damage here and there. That is not the case at all. GSC is an all-gas, no-breaks, ludicrous damage output army. It is so silly. Talked about Aberrants earlier. Obviously, the major combo there is that you take them with either the Abominant or the Biophagus, depending on what you're worried about. Biophagus is way cooler. Biophagus is probably better, but Abominant is way cooler. So I'm going to take the Abominant for now until I run into Custodes too many times, and then I'll switch to the Biophagus. The Abominant is just my favorite model in the GSC range, so I love getting to run him. But you give that character, whatever it is the enhancement to give them Infiltrator and get CP back on 4-ups when they're used on them. So Redeploy has also been FAQ'd to work the way it used to, which is dumb. I was really excited.
Boo!
Yeah. I was really excited about that being a change, and nope, we're back to redeploying after we know who's going first. So your Aberrants with that ability, and also your pre-restrained Genestealers get to line up 9 inches off the enemy line, and if you go second, redeploy to safety.
That is...
Was that like a GW FAQ? Was that in the designer's commentary?
The WTC has said that that's how they all work. GW, I believe, has also said that's how basically all of them work.
Even though that's not how they're written at all. All right.
Exactly. It's how some of them
not
are
how they
written,
should work either. If anyone's played the game, they know that that's stupid.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate not change. I'm hesitant to say I'm mad at that this changed because it didn't change, but yeah, it's a fix that I would have really liked to have seen that we didn't get. So that's silly. And the Primus lets you redeploy 3 units, and you have at least 1 Primus, probably 2. So speaking of the Primus is fantastic. Chapter Master on a unit is great. And then both of our battle line units are insane. Acolytes with melee are not really that impressive. Acolytes with hand flamers are okay. Acolytes with demolition charges are nonsense. The 10-man Acolyte unit with 4 dudes with demo charges and an attached Primus, which people argue with me about whether the Primus is necessary. I think he's great. You should take him. They just obliterate whatever they get to hit. They do have to use tunnel crawlers in order to get close enough to actually throw the demo charges, but they do get to throw all of them, which means they get 4d6 plus 4 times 3 is 12 shots, plus 4, because 4 demo charges, plus 1 each for every 5 models in the unit, because they're blast. So into a 10-man unit, that's an extra 20 shots. So it's 32 plus 4d6. No, it's extra 16 shots. So it's 28 plus 4d6. 16. 4 times... No. 2 times 4 is... Oh my gosh. Wow, it's too early in the morning for math. Extra 2 shots each, 4 dudes is 8. 12 is 20. 20 plus 4d6 shots. That's a lot of shots. With sustained hits, because that's what GSC have, which is great. Similarly, the Neophytes hit super hard. Seismic cannons are still fantastic. You throw a Primus with them, you throw a Nexus with them, you just obliterate stuff. A lot of the combat's a lot of fun. Talked about Aberrants earlier. Metamorphs are also super sweet. Pure Strains I'm back and forth on, but they're actually very fast, which is not a thing that you can come by very easily and stuff, so that's annoying. I think the GSC are a way more straightforward army than they used to be. I don't feel nearly as big brain doing GSC stuff anymore. It's kind of back to deep strike, apply gun to face, move on. A lot less tricks. But a lot of that tricksiness is going to come in with how you're utilizing Cult Ambush, where you're putting your blips, what you're getting out of your blips, where you're taking advantage of them, using things like the Nexos to be moving the blips around, using the Icon Ward to be teleporting blips when they would have been destroyed. A lot of that kind of stuff is really interesting. Charles asked in the chat here how I would use the redeploys as written, assuming that they do change, which is a great question. If we do actually have to redeploy as, the good Lord intended, before knowing who's going first, what that allows you to do is use your infiltrators to hard threaten, and say, hey, I'm in this fairly defensive position, but I can absolutely crash into your front lines, especially if I go first, so you need to deploy respecting that. And if you don't, I'm going to stay there, and if I go first, you're going to get cracked, and depending on the position, hopefully if I go second, it doesn't kill me. Or maybe we're just playing a game of chicken, and we got to see who feels more in the hole. My unit comes back on a 4+, though, so probably you, honestly. And do a lot out of that kind of stuff. It also allows you to set up stuff like your indirect in weird places, and then suddenly position it somewhere else after your opponent has deployed with that in mind. You don't start with a ton of units on the table as GSC, so there's a lot of opportunities for that. I do not think it is useless if it's before the roll-off. I've just explained to you several uses. What do you think about this, Lucas? You're a pretty tactical guy.
Well, this is also like one of my that drive me most insane about 9th edition. How do you use them effectively without first turn knowledge? Well, you get to, move your unit after you see where your opponent deploys. That seems good to me. Yeah, well, so there's that. And there's also just the aspect of it's dumb that redeploys were get out of jail free for 3 of your units. Like, the whole deploy 3 units mega aggressively with 0 risk, and then deploy 3 units completely defensively, so that if you go first, you can cram everything onto the line. If you go second, you're completely hidden with no counterplay. That was just too powerful for one ability, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think my opinion is correct, because it's just silly. Like,
it's not a redeploy. It's a fact. That was horseshit.
Before knowing, a redeploy before knowing who goes first is still powerful, because you can do things like exactly what Tyler described. You can use 10 Aberrants deployed in the midfield as a huge threatening piece, and then if you're like, I don't think the risk of these guys dying turn 1 is worth it, you can pull them away before you know who's going first. Like, it's still powerful.
After your
it's just
opponent
not
has made decisions based on the fact that you could have Aberrants there now that they have to respect.
It still changes the game, just not in a horseshit way that has zero counterplay. That's why they're effective.
Great. So there's some thoughts
And
on
I mean,
redeploys.
you could definitely point those redeploys accordingly. Like a redeploy before you know who's going first. Like if it's a relic, yeah, maybe make it 15 points. A redeploy if you know who's going first, make it like 75. Like that shit's crazy.
Yep.
If it's an auto include, make them pay for the auto include.
Yeah. I agree. I would probably pay 75 points for that if I were most of these armies.
Exactly.
I probably wouldn't as
if it
GSC,
is such
like,
an auto include, make it cost those points then. Make it a trade-off. Make it cost a unit. Do you want to hold their unit or do you want to redeploy? You know?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But
so very cool. Not Lucas. I think it was Nick was talking earlier about traps and list design. I think that's a really good thing to point out here. GSC have a couple. The big one for me is how many characters are you taking? Partially because people aren't realizing how scary of a reality assassinate is. When your characters cannot hide in your backfield, you have to throw them forward with your units. And giving up a fixed secondary like assassinate is really dangerous. But in addition to that, you got to think about what you can get instead, right? A brick of 20 Neophytes is 160 points. Adding a Primus and a Nexos to that unit is another 120 points. So think to yourself, would I rather have a Primus and a Nexos and maybe one more character and a Reductus, or would I rather another 20 Neophytes? I don't know. It's a sketchy back and forth because those 20 Neophytes are actually infinite Neophytes, depending on blips and stuff. So that's really interesting. I also think that I might be really intrigued by some like as cheap as possible battle line units, some 5-man acolyte squads with either 2 demo charges or maybe just 5 hand flamers, honestly, to generate additional blips. Because the way that the blip destruction thing works is if a unit goes into cult ambush, it goes onto like your cart, into like a set into the funny zone, and you add a blip to the table. And then at the end of your opponent's movement phase, is you get to pick one unit from the funny. You get to pick one unit from the funny zone per blip that is still on the table and set them up. It's not like all other units in the funny zone are immediately destroyed. So if you get a blip from something else later on, if you've lost some blips, that like 5-man acolyte unit can stay dead forever, and that blip can bring in something else now that rolled its 4+, or that you really wanted elseways. So there may be some intriguing value in that. Ridge Runners wise, play them with mortars. It's so much better than mining lasers. I understand that mining lasers have big damage spike potential, but they also have big get shot potential. And Crossfire is one of the strongest abilities in the game right now. GSC AP stacking is nonsense. And doing it from behind a wall is awesome. The only question in my mind is, are you taking spotters or are you taking augers? Spotters make you BS3, which means the mortar, which has D6 plus 3 blast shots, hits on 4s instead of 5s. And the auger makes it, if you get hit in addition to the minus 1 AP, you get ignores cover. You already get ignores cover on the drop turn as GSC and on every turn you drop in, so I don't personally think you need that, and I'm really scared of needing a 5 on only maybe 4 or 5 dice and not getting it. So I'm going with the +1 ballistic skill for now, but that's definitely a place you can vary. The Reductus Saboteur is probably the best character in the book. I'm taking 2 right now. Oh, I'm seriously considering taking 3. Lone Op plus Infiltrator is a very silly combo. It's great. Doing that on a platform that also has a little bit of indirect fire, very good. Doing that on a platform that in addition does D3 plus 3 mortal wounds if you dare move within range of shooting it, exceptionally good. And then in addition, she can advance and fire Huck a demo at BS2. Oh my gosh, she's insane. I'm probably taking 3 of them at this point. They're fantastic. So yeah, GSC, love it. They're crazy strong. Not as tricksy as I wish they were. Lots of cool stuff. Jackals are really cool with the Alphas and the Prowling Adjutant. So you're like doing like 30 dice every 4-up is a mortal plus grenade strat. So it's like 36, I think is how grenades work. Anyway, there's some funny stuff there. But I think the battle line stuff is where it's at, plus aberrants. As far as Tyranids are concerned, I think that people got really excited when they saw the Tyranid book, and then really unexcited when they saw everything else, and I hope they're getting excited again now that they're putting them on the table. There's a couple really interesting builds of Tyranids. Straight Monster Mash absolutely works. Tyranid monsters are so cheap. I don't have a Haruspex within arm's reach. Haruspexes are 125. What the hell? 375 for, what are they? Like 16 wounds each at T10, 3-up save, something silly like that, with great output. Fantastic. Sign me the hell up. Exocrines, fantastic. Sign me up. Moloch, I personally love. It's not for everyone, but I love it. Trigons, seems solid. What else is really good for the points? The Toxicrene's a little pricey. The Tyrannifex, fantastic for 200 points. Like, Maliceptors, insane. Just, if you want to play Nidzilla and put 10 or 12 of these big guys on the table, do it, dude. This army's sick.
Damn, dude, I might be playing Nids. You know, I love big monsters.
Bro, if you want to borrow some big monsters, I've got some big monsters. And now, on the other extreme, I think Horde Nids is super valid. Super viable. Neurogants at 4.09 points per model, ludicrous. 66 models for 270 points is just sex.
Horde, baby! Let's go!
My only complaint about Neurogants is that they're not battle line, because if they were battle line, I would absolutely be taking a full 120, 132 of them in every game. I would so pay 540 points for 132 models, and I would be very happy about it. Hive Tyrants, fantastic. Really expensive for what you're getting, but you're getting a lot. Getting that CP in an AoE every single player turn, sex. It's awesome. Psychophage, fantastic. Zoanthropes are very good. I think that a lot of people were excited about, like, take infinite Zoanthropes. That's probably the wrong number. Probably don't take 18, but a couple squads are really nice to have. I'm thinking 9 right now is the right number. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. Venomthropes are fantastic. So, like, all the Horde buffing pieces are great. Gargoyles, oh my god. They have not yet implemented anything that says you can't move after deep striking, which is crazy to me.
What?
Yeah.
Is that because it's phase tied now? The like you
Yeah,
count,
you can't move again in the movement phase.
you can't do anything for the rest of the phase, which is just about to end.
Exactly. So Gargoyles, as far as I can see the wind blowing right now, deep strike at 9, shoot, and then fire and fade 6.
Oh, that's fucking sick. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Or they just move 12 with fly, whatever that's worth, advance, fire their assault weapons, and then fire and fade 6. So 18 plus D6 inches for an OC2 unit that I can bring back D3 plus 3 of.
Hell yeah.
They're
They're
tough.
battle line?
Yeah, they're battle line.
Let's go, dude. I love Gargs.
Gargoyles? Sick. Yeah, I've got
Gargs
20
are
of them
awesome.
in my list right now. I've got 10 more in a box that I really should have brought. That is in Portland. This entire podcast is just going to be me realizing what I forgot to bring to my folks' house for the couple weeks that I'm here. Anyway, so that's really cool. I'm very excited about NIDS. NIDS are definitely not as strong as GSC are in terms of raw firepower. If you play both and you're like, man, I just want to win some games, go play GSC. You'll have more fun probably. But NIDS are very exciting, and if you want to play NIDS, you should play NIDS. They are not... There's a couple armies right now that, like, I think if you play Death Guard, find something else to play. But if you play NIDS, you're going to like it. Raveners are super cool. I really like the Neuro Tyrant personally. I think not everyone's as high on him as I am, but I think he's fantastic. For 105, it's a great price point. So I'm real excited about NIDS. And there's the other thing. How can I not mention Biovores? Biovores are probably the best unit in the Codex. They're so good. Spore Mines being able to do actions is just incredible. I'm starting with just 2 because that's the minimum number, and I want to try out a lot of different things. I'd probably end up with 5 if I had to guess, because they also shoot really nicely. Which is kind of, it's funny. It's come full circle. Do you remember the last time I was running 5 Biovores, Lucas?
Was that Rippers and Spores?
Rippers and Spores, baby! Opening 9th edition build. So yeah, exact same vibe. We're going to have spawning a 25 mil in your opponent's back corner to score behind enemy lines, and also the action. I don't remember what action. Is it teleport homers? The one that you can do in the center of the table or your opponent's DZ. Spawn a spore mine in the other corner of the battlefield to do the same thing. It's great. Score infinite points. So they're going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited for NIDS. Pyrovores are super cheap for what they do. Like, there's just so much good stuff going on. I'm very excited to see how it all shakes out. It's a good time to be a bug player. Yeah. That's bugs.
Nice, dude. Sounds fun. I'm excited.
Me too, man. The only thing that is a bummer to me is that I really want to be playing a lot of games of both right now, and I have to pick which one I'm playing every game. And also, Necrons look really fun, and I kind of want to go try them. But we're gonna stay in our lane and focus on bugs right now.
You can help me make some cool Necron stuff.
I would love to do that. Especially the warriors, man. That to me is very saucy. I understand the Lich Guard are probably stronger, and I do love Lich Guard, but the Silver Tide definitely calls to me like the sea calls to Moana.
Go make a warrior list, and I'll play that stuff.
Yeah, sounds like fun. Because I mean, this is like I own most of it. I don't have a Ghost Arc yet, but other than that, I have most of the things via my foray into Necron's early last edition. So we'll see how that goes. Cool. All right. I know you guys want to get over to your buddy's house to get some 10th Ed games going. Is there anything else about 10th that we got to talk about before signing off for today?
How silly is the new paradigm of I get a strat duplicated for free?
It's a really interesting change.
No, it's not. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. This is bullshit and you know it.
It is an interesting solution to it is a very novel approach to the CP economy. To instead of saying everyone gets lots of CP, we're gonna attach them to characters and try to hand them out in this funny kind of way. In practice, there are a lot of parts of it that I do not like. In particular, the one you're pointing at here, I think, is that Space Marines especially, but some other factions can do this as well, have multiple abilities that do this, that stack when they are explicitly not supposed to. So, for example, the Space Marine Captain has this ability, and it specifically says, once per player turn, if you have a model on the battlefield with this ability, they can use it. This is exactly the same rider that is found on Captain Artemis's datasheet, on Lysander's datasheet, and on Gilliman's datasheet, and on... Who's the other one? There's one more. Oh, is it
Uriel Ventress.
Uriel, yeah. I think there's another one. Maybe the Watchmaster. I don't know. They're like, moral of the story is there are a lot of places that you can find this rule, and they're all different rules. Right? All the kinds of Space Marine Captain have the same one, but like Uriel's is different. Artemis's is different, which means you can use a stratagem 4 times. Stop it. Get some help. This is not okay.
The other thing about it too that's weird is the being able to use a stratagem multiple times on a unit. Like,
yeah.
You could use it for 1 CP, and then you could repeat it for 0.
Yeah. So like your Necron thing is a real big example of that. It's like, oh no, I can't reanimate, except that this unit reanimates twice actually.
Yeah, I could spend a CP on it and then spend 0. Because there's no rule about not targeting the same unit with the same stratagem once per phase. The only rule is you can only use a stratagem once per phase.
Yep.
So we might have to get some sort of Sigmar-esque FAQ where you're only allowed to be targeted by 1 stratagem per phase. Because something we talked a little bit about all of our factions. Our buddy Ian, super into T-Suns. For those who haven't heard, T-Suns are looking quite strong. And they have a very goofy interaction where, like Magnus, for example, could 1 CP 0 damage, and then he can use a Cabal Ritual to repeat it again for free. And there's also another unit where you can buy a relic that lets this character in a Terminator squad like repeat Cabal Rituals. So you could keep repeating the Cabal Ritual to repeat a stratagem for free. So if you really wanted to make that Terminator unit really tanky, you could just keep using the 0 damage.
That's not how that works, for the record. We figured this out.
Really?
The way that the enhancement works is what it says is, when you are selected to use a Kabbalistic ritual, you get to act like no other enemy, no other friendly psychers have used that Kabbalistic ritual. And it specifically says no other. So once you yourself have used the ritual, you don't get to ignore that, and the rituals all say you can only use each one of them once per phase.
Okay, so you guys are okay.
Yeah. So what you can do though is you can with that you can use it 3 times. Use it once for a CP, once with the ritual with Magus, then once with he had it on a Demon Prince, can then use it again. But he can't keep using it because it has been used by a psyker in his army and not one that he can ignore. Because he can't.
Well, that's good to hear, because watching Ian do that all week was like, oh, this is crazy.
Yes. Yeah. The first time he tried to pull that out, I was like, let me see these rules real quick. That's not how that works. But yeah, would have been real crazy. Yeah, that's weird. I would like to see an FAQ that is kind of similar to the no matter how many sources of CP regen you have, you can only get one back per battle round, right? A version of that says, hey, no matter how many versions of repeat eat a stratagem you have, you can only do that once per player turn battle round, whatever they want to do.
If we're going to talk about things we want to see, I would like to see in codexes this be separated out into 2 abilities. I think it's too strong to be combined into 1 ability. Free stratagem is super powerful when everyone starts with 0, and also repeat a stratagem is super powerful when one of the core restrictions is you can only use each stratagem once per phase. Like, combining those into 1 is just insane. In my mind, anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. There are a couple places where where it is already split up. I don't remember where they are, but I've seen a couple of units that are like, you can repeat a stratagem, nothing about free CP. I don't think I've seen the other way, but like, GW knows that it's an option, so definitely say your piece.
So yeah, do that instead, because it's way more reasonable. Like, getting around 1 restriction in the core rulebook is totally fine. Getting around another restriction is totally fine. Combining those 2 into 1 effect, especially when it's got this many like edge cases and loopholes that we all need to FAQ and iron out, just throw all that in the garbage bin. In the codexes, just separate the abilities. Thank you.
Colby here brings up a really poignant take that I have not seen talked about enough, which is super valid, which is that between 9th and 10th, we took a bunch of very silly rules that all very clearly did the same thing and said, okay, we're just going to give that a name. That's a USR. Moving on. GW did then proceed to print a whole bunch of new abilities that got copy-pasted everywhere for no reason. This ability is one of them. This ability should totally be a USR. Great Tactician or something. That's a thing, it does this, and they all do the same thing, and they all can only be used once per phase. Battle round, whatever. Great. I know Lucas pointed this out earlier. This one of the most nonsense things that we've seen so far is the removal of actions and replacement with a paragraph that explains what an action is every time you want to do one.
It worked so well in 9th edition. You had it defined. There was no complaints about it. It worked flawless, not flawlessly, but it was very well defined and was a great system. And you just threw it out in exchange for typing it out on every single secondary. Why?
They also removed the massive design space of this is a thing that interacts with actions. You can't do actions under these weird circumstances because I brought a unit that doesn't let you do that. Really cool. Just doesn't exist anymore. Secondaries like Cleanse that are do actions on objectives have no riders. It's just, are you on the objective? Did you do the action? Great.
Simplified yet stupid.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's not simplified was the problem. It was pretty straightforward. So I would like to see that those would be some nice things to poke around on. All right. Anything else you want to add to that, Nick?
No.
Sweet. All right. Well, we're going to head off into the dark and play a whole bunch more 10th edition. We'll be back next week to talk about some more stuff. I'm sure we're going to get a ton of new releases and stuff. Hopefully we'll have a GT pack to talk about. I think the tournament is on Sunday, so I won't have gone to that just yet. So we'll talk about that. So won't have that experience to talk about yet, but we'll have played a bunch more games. We'll hopefully have some more rules to talk about. Maybe some hot fixes. We'll see how it's going. But overall, right now, how are we feeling about 10th as like the big picture? Last thing I want to hear. What are your overall closing concluding thoughts?
I'm feeling good. I mean, as much as I just mauled it for a couple minutes, those are some of the things that I'm more upset about in the new edition. So overall, I'm still feeling optimistic about the direction of the game, and I feel like the more egregious things will be ironed out in short order, hopefully. So, yeah, overall, feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I'm excited for once we get the whole picture. I think a lot of like last week was people freaking out about data sheets, but then like we didn't know points. Now that we know points, it's like, okay, how do we actually play the game? We have a rough idea with the Leviathan missions and like the tactical deck, but like we still don't have the GT pack, which may or may not massively change how like the game is actually played. So yeah, I'm just excited to kind of put some stuff on the table and
Oh yeah.
figure it out.
The GT pack would be a great place to put a rule that says you can only spend a stratagem for 0 CP once per battle round. Just saying, GW. Cool. Yeah, I'm in a similar kind of spot. I'm very excited. There are definitely a lot of things to be anxious about, and there are definitely some changes that people do not love for good reason. But overall, the edition has been a ton of fun so far. I had a ton of fun playing that game. I'm very excited to play it a lot more. And I think that down on the line, I think people are really going to like this edition, especially playing these new missions. I'm excited. Cool. All right, well, with that all being said and done, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, there's a lot of 10th chat happening down in our Patreon Discord. You can find that on Patreon or on a YouTube membership section. We're definitely going to be putting out a bunch of bit reps and whatnot and doing some streaming once everything is properly out. I want to make sure that that content is actually usable for more than a week when we find out that the missions are different. Colin's also doing a lot of streaming over on his side of things. If you like our silly little icons, we got merch over at bestintabletop.com/store. You can stomp them good in any color of the rainbow. And with that all being said and done, thanks so much for listening. I've been Tyler.
I've been Nick.
I'm still Lucas.
And we will see you all next time for some more 10th edition mayhem. Take care, everyone.